into a studio and I know exactly what that painting needs to conclude it, and it'll be concluded. But in the interim, lots of other things are going on. I'm making lots of other paintings.
Yeah. So it's not a kind of linear, I suppose in a way, I'm thinking about in educational terms, you know, we often talk about kind of make something, reflect on it, evaluate it, make the next one, and there's a kind of linearity to that process, but this isn't the case in reality, is it? It's kind of not happening. Yeah.
Well, just because it happens to be a little bit different in my case, these were done quickly.
Okay.
One day, maybe two, wet on wet, so the modification of them was done quite quickly. But the consideration of it is quite from a lot of other borrowed works. So they do trim them down in those particular forms. And the handling of the paint. But partly I think is also through the process. And these, the idea was to keep the paint very thin and let the white come through. Whereas obviously for different people we have different ways of approaching what that process is. So it's something inherent there, and also the effect of using paper as opposed to a more solid support.
Yeah. With what you're saying now, there's a real sort of understanding of the materials and the way that you need to use those materials.
Yeah, the ways of that.
Yeah. But I wonder if that's kind of undervalued in some way. There's kind of something in that process that's really important and individual to each of you about how you know and use your materials and the time taken to kind of understand that stuff.
So I was just going to say one thing, because I like the way that they would juxtapose it. But those pieces are very flat, they're very ephemeral in terms of it, whereas Alex is they're there and solidly stand out, bulky, and that's a completely different approach to begin with to think of what he's trying to achieve and what those painters are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But going back to the idea of in between abstraction, it's kind of tackling that concept from a different end, but that is a natural to what the painting is.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting comparison, and I think when I'm looking at your work, I'm seeing there's a balance there between the image and the material that's maybe more weighted towards material in your work. I mean, perhaps. I find there's an interesting area of exploration there that we're all doing, I suppose. We're kind of balancing it.
These paintings for me I was using other processes, not processes I've never used before, but they were clearly something slightly different from what I'd done previously. And I think what I put that down to is what you talked about, the image and the material, is maybe more of a desire to establish an image and have less material, so they are less built. I used to think about paintings more as building them rather than painting them, kind of constructing them, and almost like hammering home the temporal aspect and putting time into these over a period of a long sequence. And these maybe were made over a couple of months, but when I say made, there was more removing paint than putting it on. So I wanted them to be flat, and they're not completely flat, but I wanted them to be flatter than previous paintings. So they're almost like prints of, there's monoprint processes, putting stuff on, taking it off, squeegeeing it across, touching it up with a brush. Things that you might do in a print room rather than necessarily about related to painting that I hadn't really done previously, that felt quite fresh, and certainly the result is that they look flatter than previous works that I've made. And I quite like that at this point. Not sure where that'll go, but it was a lot of putting things on, knowing that they'd be covered and then revealed again at a later point. So that in almost all of them, that sort of dragging horizontally is just removing the paint, and to see whatever was underneath. So every time I was going back to it, I was doing part of something. It's like I was never feeling I was completing anything. I was doing something that would hold up until later, when I could bring it back into the...
And that's a real emphasis on what the material can do. You aren't necessarily in control of that process quite so much, are you? You don't know what's going to be revealed.
No, but there's lots. Oh, that's nice, or that's awful, or there's a lot of you can become adept, if you like, or you can become more familiar with the brushes, the squeegees, the knives, whatever, And on a small scale, a lot of this is holding paintings in my hand, kind of, you know, making moves this close, which is quite interesting. That's why they're so messed up at the edges. They're full of fingerprints. I don't want to leave them. You know, just expose the processes of making in the things themselves. But yeah, there's a lot of trial and error and thinking that works, that doesn't. A little bit lighter, ease off a bit, more paint, less paint. All of the things that you do as a painter, just with slightly different implements that I'd used in previous paintings.
I think with some of mine, I was trying to actually take the material further to see how far I could get the material to still produce those tones and colours that were part of the composition earlier when the painting was flat. So in other words, to see if you could still retain that with a heavier, more sort of thicker paint. And at what point did I lose that kind of control over the paint that the material took over? I mean, I was in the art gallery this morning, Leeds Art Gallery, looking at Kossoff and Auerbach, and in both cases there was points where the image, you had to almost piece together the image in front of you to work out what it kind of was. It was like a game almost, to kind of map out, oh, there's a portrait in there somewhere, or there's it's a painting of a construction of some sort. There was an orange one by Auerbach, and a pink and grey and white one by Kossoff, of a portrait. And in those cases, you felt that the materials were kind of taking over and starting to control almost the painting itself, and to some extent, it became an abstract image, you know.
Yeah. Just to go back slightly to what Tom was saying, I find the idea of removal of paint incredibly interesting because it's talked about so little. And people tend to, when they first come to painting, as students tend to not think about it as part of the process, and yet it's very, very key to my practice, it's very key to Tom's, is the idea of putting paint on as a stage in the process, and that will be removed at a later date, but will always leave a trace of itself behind, because there is an uncontrollability about it.
So it becomes a kind of layering and an excavation and kind
Very
of
much so,
revealing
yeah.
and covering up. That kind of got me also thinking about, strangely, place, weirdly. I kind of think that when I came around here, maybe it's because you kind of tend to put the things you're interested onto the things you're looking at. I was interested in, I started to think, well, this all kind of has some connection to place. There's a place in all of these, whether it's the place of the canvas, the surface itself becomes a place, this kind of place of activity of you working on the surface and making this thing, but also the image that you might be creating is also, for some of you, there's a place that you're depicting as well. So there's quite a lot of different, I don't know whether that, some are sort of intermediate places, maybe partly remembered or partly imagined, or entirely reconstructed.